Volume 1, Chapter 10 of The Last Man. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Eddie Winter. The Last Man by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. Volume 1, Chapter 10. After these events, it was long before we were able to attain any degree of composure. A moral tempest had wrecked our richly freighted vessel, and we, remnants of the diminished crew, were aghast at the losses and changes which we had undergone. Idris passionately loved her brother, and could ill brook an absence whose duration was uncertain. His society was dear and necessary to me. I had followed up my chosen literary occupations with delight under his tutorship and assistance. His mild philosophy, unerring reason, and enthusiastic friendship were the best ingredient, the exalted spirit of our circle. Even the children bitterly regretted the loss of their kind playfellow. Deeper grief oppressed Perdita. In spite of resentment, by day and night she figured to herself the toils and dangers of the wanderers. Raymond, absent, struggling with difficulties, lost to the power and rank of the Protectorate, exposed to the perils of war, became an object of anxious interest. Not that she felt any inclination to recall him, if recall must imply a return to their former union. Such return she felt to be impossible, and while she believed it to be thus, and with anguish regretted that so it should be, she continued angry and impatient with him who occasioned her misery. These perplexities and regrets caused her to bathe her pillow with nightly tears, and to reduce her in person and in mind to the shadow of what she had been. She sought solitude and avoided us when in gaiety and unrestrained affection we met in a family circle. Lonely musings, interminable wanderings, and solemn music were her only pastimes. She neglected even her child, shutting her heart against all tenderness. She grew reserved towards me, her first and fast friend. I could not see her thus lost without exerting myself to remedy the evil. Remediless, I knew, if I could not in the end bring her to reconcile herself to Raymond. Before he went, I used every argument, every persuasion, to induce her to stop his journey. She answered the one with a gush of tears, telling me that to be persuaded, life and the goods of life were a cheap exchange. It was not will that she wanted, but the capacity. Again and again she declared, it were as easy to enchain the sea, to put reins on the wind's viewless courses, as for her to take truth for falsehood, deceit for honesty, heartless communion for sincere confiding love. She answered my reasonings more briefly, declaring with disdain that the reason was hers, and until I could persuade her that the past could be unacted, that maturity could go back to the cradle, and that all that was could become as though it had never been, it was useless to assure her that no real change had taken place in her fate. And thus with stern pride she suffered him to go, though her very heartstrings cracked at the fulfilling of the act, which rent from her all that made life valuable. To change the scene for her, and even for ourselves, all unhinged by the cloud that had come over us, I persuaded my two remaining companions that it were better that we should absent ourselves for a time from Windsor. We visited the north of England, my native Ulswater, and lingered in scenes dear from 1,000 associations. We lengthened our tour into Scotland, that we might see Loch Katrine and Loch Lomond. Thence we crossed to Ireland, and passed several weeks in the neighbourhood of Killarney. The change of scene operated to a great degree as I expected. After a year's absence, Perdita returned in gentler and more docile mood to Windsor. The first sight of this place, for a time, unhinged her. Here every spot was distinct with associations now grown bitter. The forest glades, the ferny dells, the lawny uplands, the cultivated and cheerful country spread around the silver pathway of ancient Thames, all earth, air, and wave took up one choral voice, inspired by memory instinct with plaintive regret. But my essay towards bringing her to a saner view of her own situation did not end here. Perdita was still to a great degree uneducated. When first she left her peasant life and resided with the elegant and cultivated Evadne, the only accomplishment she brought to any perfection was that of painting, for which she had a taste almost amounting to genius. This had occupied her in her lonely cottage when she quitted her Greek friend's protection. Her palette and easel were now thrown aside. Did she try to paint, thronging recollections made her hand tremble, her eyes fill with tears. With this occupation she gave up almost every other, and her mind preyed upon itself almost to madness. For my own part, since Adrian had first withdrawn me from my selvatic wilderness to his own paradise of order and beauty, I had been wedded to literature. I felt convinced that, however it might have been in former times, in the present stage of the world, no man's faculties could be developed, no man's moral principles be enlarged and liberal, without an extensive acquaintance with books. To me they stood in the place of an active career, of ambition, and those palpable excitements necessary to the multitude. The collation of philosophical opinions, the study of historical facts, the acquirement of languages, were at once my recreation and the serious aim of my life. I turned author myself. My productions, however, were sufficiently unpretending. They were confined to the biography of favourite historical characters, especially those whom I believed to have been traduced, or about whom clung obscurity and doubt. As my authorship increased, I acquired new sympathies and pleasures. I found another and a valuable link to enchain me to my fellow creatures. My point of sight was extended, and the inclinations and capacities of all human beings became deeply interesting to me. Kings have been called the fathers of their people. Suddenly I became, as it were, the father of all mankind. Posterity became my heirs. My thoughts were gems to enrich the treasure house of man's intellectual possessions. Each sentiment was a precious gift I bestowed on them. Let not these aspirations be attributed to vanity. They were not expressed in words, nor even reduced to form in my own mind, but they filled my soul, exalting my thoughts, raising a glow of enthusiasm, and led me out of the obscure path in which I had before walked into the bright noon enlightened highway of mankind, making me, citizen of the world, a candidate for immortal honours, an eager aspirant to the praise and sympathy of my fellow men. No one certainly ever enjoyed the pleasures of composition more intensely than I. If I left the woods, the solemn music of the waving branches, and the majestic temple of nature, I sought the vast halls of the castle, and looked over wide fertile England, spread beneath our regal mount, and listened the while to inspiring strains of music. At such times solemn harmonies or spirit-stirring airs gave wings to my lagging thoughts, permitting them, methought, to penetrate the last veil of nature and her God, and to display the highest beauty in visible expression to the understandings of men. As the music went on, my ideas seemed to quit their mortal dwelling house. They shook their pinions, and began a fight, sailing on the placid current of thought, filling the creation with new glory, and rousing sublime imagery that else had slept voiceless. Then I would hasten to my desk, weave the new found web of mind in firm texture and brilliant colours, leaving the fashioning of the material to a calmer moment. But this account, which might as properly belong to a former period of my life as to the present moment, leads me far afield. It was the pleasure I took in literature, the discipline of mind I found arise from it, that made me eager to lead Perdita to the same pursuits. I began with light hand and gentle allurement, first exciting her curiosity, and then satisfying it in such a way as might occasion her at the same time that she half forgot her sorrows in occupation, to find in the hours that succeeded a reaction of benevolence and toleration. Intellectual activity, though not directed towards books, had always been my sister's characteristic. It had been displayed early in life, leading her out to solitary musing among her native mountains, causing her to form innumerous combinations from common objects, giving strength to her perceptions,